I have to agree. Like now that I finished Death a few days ago. I have to agree. Famine is my favorite. I'm aware that Pestilence is the most top tier of all of the four horsemen, like the four horsemen men. But I feel like for me personally, I would gravitate more towards Famine, especially reading the little bonus chapter that she had in her newsletter, the author. There is just something about this man's relationship with Anna, his relationship with humanity. It feels more realistic. I feel like Pestilence is an idealized version of what a relationship with a horseman of the apocalypse would have been. And Famine, I think, is a little bit closer to the truth, where Famine doesn't necessarily feel a type of way, like, doesn't feel like humanity deserves redemption, but he does love Anna enough to give up his divinity anyway and be with these mortals that he doesn't really feel like super great about. Like, he's just like, no, they still suck. Like, they still suck, but Anna's worth it, so I'm gonna do it. Also, God bless this man, because they were about to get it the hell on in their bonus chapter, and then Famine's like, I can't prevent pregnancy anymore. And Anna's like, it's cool. And he was like, is it cool? Are you sure? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, we love explicit consent. I had a lot of smoke for War, but I think in light of Death's book, I still don't love him as a romantic interest. I feel like he's still a little bit icky. Like, it's still a little bit icky. I think knowing that he's the war guy and he's going to take conquests of war in that way, like, it makes sense. But I think for me, I was just like, not about it. But he was cool as like a platonic buddy to Lazarus, though. Now here is where I get yelled at. I did not care for Thanatos at all. Like, he was fine. He wasn't Pestilence, he wasn't Famine, but I was vibing. I liked his enthusiasm towards Lazarus. But at the same time, he had three examples of how falling in love with a human was gonna go for him. He understood the uselessness of his task, because he's gonna lose Lazarus and he doesn't want to lose Lazarus. But then in the end, he's just like, nah, fuck y'all, I'm gonna go ahead with the apocalypse anyway. And my brothers, you guys have to help, even though you guys have said you don't want to do this. Like, even though, like, you guys have essentially outvoted me, I'm going to start the apocalypse anyway, knowing that it's going to upset Lazarus. I was just like, oh, God, I was so disappointed in you. It was a lesson that he didn't need to learn. It just felt like the book needed like a climax, like a dramatic climax for a 4-book series, when the book hadn't really earned that. I felt like Death had learned his lesson at that point. He didn't need Lazarus to die in order for the lesson to really hit home like that. Like, in the fact that the book made it feel like that, I was just like, ugh, Thanatos, why? Why? I did like the difference between Death and Famine and Death and the other brothers, in that Death does not enjoy death. He does not inflict death in order to inflict suffering on the people. I don't think he sees death as like a bad thing that he's doing to humanity. It's just a part of life. So he's like, oh, okay, God says I gotta go and kill all these people. At least I'm putting them out of their misery. They just die. Like, they either touch me and they die, or they just die. And that's opposed to Pestilence, who I think was very uncomfortable with death, because I think the way that he has to kill people is it's very visceral, it's very icky, and it's very gross. So, like, he stays away from people because he knows he can't handle seeing the result of his own plagues, which is a very different thing from Death, where he's just like, I don't mind having to look at you to do it, because I have to carry your soul to the afterlife anyway. It doesn't matter how up close and personal I get with you. And then compare that to Famine, who like actually like he took a lot of joy in killing people. I don't think he took like pleasure in it, like spicy pleasure in it, but he definitely had a level of pettiness and anger in his heart towards humanity. So then when he did have to kill humans, he was like, ha 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 ha, ha, okay. I think Famine alone was also somebody who killed people or had people killed in a way that was outside of the purview of their tribulation. Like, War, on the one hand, people die as a result of war, and he was killing people directly, but he's also war. He's conquesting. So that's it's a very active way to die, war. Whereas Famine, he's not supposed to be killing the people. He's supposed to be killing the crops and and the resources, and then humanity dies that way, and it's a very slow, impersonal death. Like, famine's just a thing that happens, whereas war is something that's more motivated by humanity. Like, war is the most human of the horsemen in that way. But then when you see famine killing people directly, it's because he's mad. Like, he has actual, like, murderous intent in a way that the others didn't. And I feel like that's very interesting for famine. So his kind of heel turn, or his face turn, I think, because heel turn is when they go bad. I guess face turn is when they go good. Famine's turn is more realistic, and he actually makes more of a change than anybody else does, because he goes from actively harboring enough anger towards humanity that he's killing them up close and personal, to being among humanity and deciding that even though he doesn't really like this species, Anna is worth it, and I love that for him. But yeah, I think my initial ranking of the men stands. I think it's war as a romantic interest, and then death, and then pestilence and famine are kind of swapping off depending on how I feel in that moment. Right now, I feel like I like famine the most because I read the most recent thing as one of his bits. Like, it was his bonus chapter was the last thing I read for this series. But also, I understand the bar that pestilence set, and how none of the other men really rose up to meet it. So, pestilence forever.